Good evening. Call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Gary.
Here.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Pepcorn.
Here.
Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. Must be some interesting things on the agenda tonight. We haven't had the room so full. This is Fire Prevention Week. This year's theme is Every Second Counts, Plan Two Ways Out, which aims to educate the public about critical importance of developing a home escape plan and practicing it twice a year. During Fire Prevention Week, all 7 fire stations are available for tours and visits from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And what the chief wants you to know, if you live in a new house, it burns faster. So you need to have an escape plan because oftentimes you can be in trouble within 10 to 15 minutes. Is that correct? 5 minutes. So now he says 5. Are you going to ask for faster fire trucks now? Or? Yeah. Melissa Markegard, community health educator, spoke at the 2017 NDSU Pharmacy Homecoming Seminar on the topic of pharmacist engagement to target opioid abuse prevention. She focused on the patient-caregiver education on Oxalon administration and available resources for obtaining Oxalon in the community. It's important that the caregiver knows what to do and how to respond to this, right, John? Yeah. That's what you're putting out there? On September 26, representatives from local and regional long-term care facilities participated in a functional exercise at the Public Safety Building that took participants through a scenario involving an evacuation of long-term care residents due to a natural gas pipeline burst. 71 people participated, which will help to assist facilities in meeting emergency preparedness requirements sent by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Systems. I think in Florida we're aware in a hurricane where some people had died in a nursing home and want to make sure we know what to do in case of an emergency. The library has scheduled community workshops on October 17th and 18th in conjunction with its strategic planning survey. I encourage residents to go to this just to tell us where we want the library to go in the future and strategically where you think they should be spaced in the community. 8 staff members from the Fargo Public Library attended the North Dakota Library Association Convention in Grand Forks last week. Librarians from across the state met, share ideas, get inspired, and connect with each other in order to help libraries continue to transform and meet the needs of the community. Planning. The city's Planning and Development Department and members of the Arts and Culture Commission are going to introduce the Public Arts Master Plan for the City of Fargo at public meetings starting next week in an effort to progress Fargo's cultural evolution and development of Creative Hub. The meetings will be held October 16th at the Carlson Library, October 18th and 19th at the City Commission Hall, and October 21st at NDSU's Renaissance Hall. They're really looking for input from the public on where we want to go with our arts master plan for the city of Fargo. So please attend. Police. Last week, members of the police department hosted a community meeting at the Fargo Cast Public Health and also took part in Coffee with a Cop Day at Caribou Coffee. Chief Todd sees these meetings as opportunities to build relationships with the community, and that is why the police have such a great support citizens of Fargo. You're asked from Todd's point of view is cheese by coffee, no donuts, right? Keep in shape. Solid waste. For Fargo residents who want, this is a great idea because remember we have spring cleanup in the spring and now we have something in the fall that anybody can participate in because somebody just asked me about this. Fargo residents who want to do fall cleaning around their house, the landfill will be available free of charge October 14th through the 21st. So if you want to get rid of stuff, we're not going to pick it up, but you can take it out there for free. Landfill hours are from 7:15 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 7:15 to 1 p.m. Saturday. You can go out there before tailgating, go to the game, have a great time. Proof of residency may be requested, by the way. Moving on to the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda, moving item number 6 from the consent agenda to regular agenda and adding item 12.1 to consent agenda for a raffle on 10/2017 for Homeward Animal Shelter. Also moving item 47 to the beginning of the regular agenda since people are going to be at the Indigenous Day celebrations here later and would just like to bring forth the resolution that they have for us. Is there a motion?
I so move. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of September 25th, 2017 regular meeting?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Gehring, Grinberg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 41, excluding item number 6, which has been moved to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Grinberg, Strand. Any discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Pepcorn. Mahoney.
Aye. We'll move to regular agenda. It's item 47. I think Commissioner Strand's going to introduce it, and Rachel Hoffman, who's the chair of the Human Relations Commission, is going to discuss it.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney and members of the commission. The Human Relations Commission was approached by some members of the community who are representing labor, specifically asking for us to weigh in on an inclusive memorandum or resolution for our city. The exact same resolution has gone before the Moorhead Council, and as I understand it, will go before the West Fargo Council, is before our council tonight, commission, and will be a regional approach to advancing the topic of inclusion. You know, and I'll just say a couple more thoughts, and then we'll turn it over to the chair of the Human Relations Commission, Rachel Hoffman. But this is the week that folks were talking about having some rallies in our town when the topics were bubbling up about white nationalism and white supremacy and some of these issues across the country. This is the week that there were going to be rallies on both sides of that. So that's part of the context of this resolution about inclusion, is that we want to be a positive community, and we want to be inclusive and respectful of all people. Last comment I'd like to make just to our commission, you know, and some of us got excited when we saw, for example, that Amazon was looking to create a new headquarters. And you know, people like me are out there going, well, why can't Fargo compete with this, even though we don't have 1 million people? But one of the requirements one of the most fundamental requirements Amazon set forth in their criteria for a new community is that they will only move to a community that's inclusive. So this is a contemporary topic for us today, and it's one that we should be embracing in every regard as the world changes in front of our eyes and our demographics change and our population changes, that we're always respectful of every individual. We're watching out for each individual, and we're protecting every individual so they're safe and feel welcome in their communities. So I look forward to our commission making this public stand on inclusion and on being a positive community in that regard. And in that light, turn it over to our chair of the Human Relations Commission, Rachel Hoffman.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for having me here, or for having us and allowing us to present this resolution to you tonight. And I think Commissioner Strand did a great job of kind of saying what it all entails. And really, I mean, it's a very simple resolution, and it just it is a statement to show that we are a welcoming and inclusive community, and that there is not tolerance for acts of hate and discrimination within our community. And I think that's basically what this resolution does, and it really just shows that the city, that's what it stands for. Does anyone have any questions, or?
Could you just have your commission stand up so we have members of the commission that are on the commission stand up?
Yeah.
Who do you
The
have
members
here?
of
Is it Gary?
Maybe it's just Barry tonight.
Okay.
I know there's lots of supporters of this resolution here tonight, so thank you everyone for coming in support of it. But are there any other, because I think
Questions from the commissioner? No questions, thank you.
Perfect.
Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Strand.
Yes.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Pepcorn.
No.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Item 42, Commissioner Gehring would like to discuss special assessments.
So first, I want to apologize to John Strand. I meant to put in the email that John and I are putting this on jointly. If you read the letter, it does have John and I's name on there. With the budget being passed and a lot of outpouring of angst about how much people are paying in property taxes and specials and things like that, I simply want, and John and I want, and I'll let you speak for yourself, I guess, to have a discussion about special assessments and how they're assessed for new developments. I think most of us understand that there are multiple types of special assessments, and I feel like if we break those things up, we could have a more effective conversation. So for this first step, I would at least like to ask the commission that we have a brown bag meeting to talk solely about special assessments for new developments, new homes, new buildings, and how those work, and if there's a better way forward to see if there's a lesser impact that we can have on these folks that this impacts. And John, I'll let you speak to whatever you want as well, but that's the gist of the letter that I put forward.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Gehrig. I believe we're all, and there's more topics with property taxes in general, but I think it's okay for us to get a common ground of understanding with some of us rather new commissioners. I'm a year and a half into this, Commissioner Grinberg and I, and yet the locomotive is going so far down the tracks, it's good to stop and like say, how did we get here? How do we do specials? How do others do specials? What can we do differently with specials? And are there improvements we can make in our system? And at a minimum, gain a better understanding ourselves and in the public about how specials are handled.
One of the concerns I have with this, although maybe you're going to have two brown bags, but also people in older neighborhoods are getting specials and they're assessed in a different manner. I think Commissioner Pepcorn, the engineering firm or engineering team, came up with a different way of doing this, and it might be an opportunity sometime to have a rediscussion of that because some of the neighborhoods have found some of those choices hard. If it can't all be done in one brown bag, maybe perhaps we could do that in a second one. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a large discussion, and an hour brown bag I don't think is enough to cover all that ground. I think if we take this in chunks, we can have a more effective conversation. And that way, if we do vote on anything to make any sort of changes, it's not a holistic change. It's picking parts of this and seeing if we have common ground, if there is a change to be made. So I'll just make the suggested motion to get more discussion. I move to hold a brown bag meeting within the next month in order to learn more about special assessments for new developments and explore alternative options available.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Grinberg, you had something to say?
Would groups like the Home Builders Association be involved in that discussion? Or is it just city staff and commission?
This will be, like we have with all brown bags, it will be open to the public. They can come if they want, if they have questions, certainly. I want to hear from our staff and how they assess these things. If folks want to comment on those things, by all means, please come. I hope people come to this.
I'm just thinking that if it's a two-step, two-meeting process, that the second meeting should involve developers and the Home Builders Association, their perspectives on it.
I have no problem with that.
Commissioner Pepcorn.
Mr. Chairman, I think the other thing we have to be careful of is sometimes just to make changes. I would like to hear from our engineering department because other cities do it different than us. So just to have some, I think it's a great idea, but to have some comparison as to what the reason that we do it the way we do it and what are some different alternatives. But the one thing I think we have to be careful of is just to make change isn't always a good thing. And so I think we have to be careful. And I do think back in the day, and I don't want to put the engineers on the spot, but one of the reasons that we've done it this way is that then we can control the performance of the work. I don't know if that describes it well, but like the underwater lines and things like that, we are sure that they are consistent up to our standards. And so, but you can maybe do that through bidding and things like that too. So I think it's a great idea and I support it too. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. We'll move to public hearings. Number one is 44A. It's a continued from 11/6, continued to 11/6/17. Appeal the Board Adjustment decision on a variance request on 3931 and 3949 37th Avenue South to allow for proposed building to be constructed to a lower elevation than otherwise required by the city's floodproofing code, as referenced in Article 21.6 of the Fargo Municipal Code, denied by the Board of Adjustments on 8/22 and continued from 9/25/17 regular agenda. Planning staff has asked this to be continued to Monday, March 6th. Can I have a motion?
I'll move to continue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just clarifying, March 6th?
November 6th?
March 6th. I think you said March 6th, November?
I'm sorry, it says November 6th. Sorry. Time's going fast, huh? Roll call, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Number B, 44B For B, special assessments for the following improvement districts all have been approved by the Special Assessment Commission on 9/6/17, setting interest rates to 1% per annum over the net rate of bonds, financing, and projects. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This evening before you, we have 23 projects that we've constructed, finalized, and gone through the assessment process with all of the required notices. The inspections have all been done. So we have a total of $43 million in project costs that were completed, and we're proposing $35 million in assessments. These assessments affect just under 3,200 parcels this year. So I don't know if you have any other questions at this time.
Commissioner Gary?
What's the rate?
Interest rate, it varies. Some of them, we set it at 1% above the bond interest, and so some of these projects haven't been bonded yet, and others have. But generally speaking, we're right around 4%, and it varies a little bit project to project.
Term? 20
Term, 25 on some projects, most of them. Some are required to be only 10 years. It's set by statute, so.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to these assessments? Come forth, please.
Hi, I live on North Broadway, 2300 block of Broadway, and when they put in our new roads.
Just need your name first.
My name is Ivan Savageau.
Thank you.
Haven't done this before, so
No, that's
bear with
okay.
me. When we got our assessments, the west side of Broadway is paying like 10 times what the east side of Broadway is paying. I've talked to the engineering people since last February. It's come down to this. This is, you guys are the only ones that can do anything about it, apparently. And I've got some handouts here. Could I approach them, give them to you? Just want to show you. Would you? I got 4 of them there. How many do
And I think we have these ahead of time, too. I think you already gave them.
I brought them up there before, but I
Okay.
don't know if everybody's gotten them or whatever, but it's,
I got one already. Thank you, sir. So can I just make a question? So, and Bruce, maybe you can answer this for me, but we've kind of gone, it started a lot higher than this, basically, the original number, and it's gone down. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, just to explain? Because especially when you look across the, right now, a lot of these specials are on the 18,000.
which way do I?
Can you explain that just a little bit?
Well, the change on the calculation, I did ask Dan to be ready to speak to that tonight. I don't know if that completely got to Ivan's issue, but Dan, can you come up and talk about how you recalculated and resped those specials based on actual?
And Ivan, we won't take away from your time, but I just wanted to, but it wasn't the number originally a little bit higher than that, and so,
Oh, yeah, it's like a moving target. The
Right.
first time it was $24,000 for mine, and now it's $15,500.
okay.
Commissioners, when we created the infrastructure policy, we based our arterial on a minimum of a 40-foot roadway for a single family. Understanding, we looked at this project, and Broadway's a 36-foot. Last commission, you approved us taking that, we added a line to our infrastructure policy where we would use the 40-foot unless the roadway is smaller. In this case, it was smaller. So we did a 10% reduction on the paving portion of this roadway. So specials that started out around 18 with the reduction averaged about a $1,500 reduction in their specials. Early on in the project, they had a project we constructed in early 2002, 2003. We credited that one back for an average of a $1,700 reduction. We eliminated those specials. So in total, they got around $3,200, $3,300 reduction in their specials right off the top.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask another question? So it just seems like Broadway, the houses that are on Broadway are getting a much more higher number than the neighbors, and can you explain that?
We use arterial bands for our arterials. Broadway's an arterial. Every parcel in the city of Fargo is affected by one north-south, one east-west arterial. So if you're fronting an arterial, which the west side is, you pay for the minimum, which was $208 a foot. The east side doesn't front, so they pay for their local and a side to Broadway. So they pay for whatever their local cost of their local street is, and the cap on the indirect benefit is $31.20 a foot. You combine those two because in an arterial, there's more traffic on it. They're used to move traffic to and fro throughout the city. So we established that cap.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the thing that, and I think that's why this, having a brown bag is a good thing, because it's almost like you get penalized just because of a different street. If you live one block over, that just, and I know I know you're following, these are our standards, but it just, that just doesn't make sense to me.
But every street in Fargo pays for their local. Broadway happens to be the west side's local. And every parcel is affected by a north, south, east, west
Just
arterial.
maybe if you could explain what the east side's local is.
The east side local, they pay, let's say, on 22nd Street, or 22nd Avenue, in that area. They will pay for their paving on 22nd. And then they pay for.
So it'd be
part of
higher when 22nd is,
Yes, they'll pay their portion of that. Then they'll pay for a portion of Broadway at the same time when we reconstructed Broadway. So they have an indirect benefit to Broadway based on our arterial ban.
any other questions, commissioners? Are you done, or Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Mr. Savageau, I remember hearing from you, and a few times.
Yes.
And then you've engaged with our folks, and from a cursory view, just the notion that one side of the street is different than the other is an attention getter.
Yes.
You know, how satisfied are you with your understanding and your work with the city? Where did you land with this issue? There's still a disparity, and you're still contesting it?
Yes, of course, yeah. I'm paying 5 times what the guy across the street from me is paying. He's got twice as much frontage on Broadway. You know, you've got a system. I mean, you're working with your system fine, but the system doesn't work for all of us, obviously. We're getting hung out. And it's 25 years. I'm 65 years old. Figure it out. The $3,500 that Dan says that they credited us for, adjusted. 10 years ago, you came through and did the west side of Broadway. You tore everything out. They put in new pavement, approaches, and curb and gutter. We've been paying on that for 10 years, had it half paid off. Now they come through, tear everything out. Well, we'll forget the 2,000 you owe on those specials, but now you can start paying for 25 years more. It just seems excessive to me. It's a lot of money.
You next?
Yes. I just live right down the block. I just moved.
What's your name, too?
I'm sorry. My name is Kevin Olson, 2218 North Broadway. Yeah, the problem that I have is it seems like what was driving the project was to put this bigger pipe for the sewage to go down Broadway. And you got a grant for that, and so we didn't have to pay for that. But because of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is for the benefit of the whole city and including West Fargo. So because Fargo now is taking on sewage for West Fargo, and you want to put in this bigger pipe to handle that infrastructure, it seems like we're the ones that are getting stuck with it. And that's why I'm here tonight. I just feel like this is not just. And I just want to voice that to you
Okay.
as respectfully as I can. Thank you.
You did. Well, we'll have an engineer explain that in a minute here. We'll let everybody do their protests first. Go ahead, next.
I'm George Kruger, also speaking to this issue. When I look at what was done at the street, and I'd like to remind you that Broadway is not a little neighborhood, quiet neighborhood street. If we were several blocks off, we would have just basically local traffic. But now we're the main artery that goes from North Fargo to downtown, and if you watch the traffic, you've got semis, you've got trucks, you know, they're from all over Fargo. I was glad to hear that you wanted to look at the process of determining assessments. It seems to me in this case, there has to be a distinguishment of some kind between a quiet neighborhood and a main artery. If all of Fargo is using that artery, then it seems to me it's very unfair to expect us who have a 60-foot lot to be paying exorbitant assessments. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wayne Fehrenbach, 2002 Broadway. I also am part of this confusion in that I paid off my $4,000 10 years ago, and now I got to pay again $16,000 on taxes for these specials for 25 years. I'm 64 years old. This is not fair. You need to change how it's set up.
Thank you.
I'm Guy Peterson, 2110 North Broadway, and I was at a meeting that we had several months ago about this, where we were told that the reason that this was going on was because you had gotten a government grant to put the pipe down the main part of Broadway. At that point in time, we were told that the additional assessments were going to be because they had to repair the substructure. Well, it went down my house, and I looked, and I worked in an industry where we dig pits and dig in the road all the time, and they did not go curb to curb 6 feet down. They dug a pit in the middle that was sloped as necessary to put a pipe in the ground. I did not see one bit of substructure work that would be anything other than what was needed to get that pipe in the ground. You can't get it through without tearing up the surface. You can't get it in the ground without putting in a pit, an angled pit that's steeped at OSHA standards. I didn't see anything that was not necessary to get the pipe in the ground. So how we're getting $16,000 on average in special assessments when the grant was supposed to pay for the entire pipe and everything that needs to be done for that, I didn't see anything else happening. So I don't see where this $16,000 that's hitting all of us is coming from, because there was no additional substructure that I saw during the entire project in front of my house. There was a pit dug that needed to be dug to put that in the ground. They tore up the surface to get it down there, and then they repaved and filled in the pit and packed it down to do that. But you would have had to do that anyway. I would like some explanation as to what was done in addition that counted for this substructure that is what we're all being assessed for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Steve, could you just tell us which item this is of the 22 projects? Which item is it out of our 23? Which number is it?
This is item number 12. It's project BR16B.
Okay. Engineering, can you have explanation of what went on there, please? Bruce, who do we have?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question in the meantime?
Sure.
Would it be, and maybe this is for the staff too, but could we continue this one so we can do a better job of and finding out what's going on? And I think we need to do a better.
We could do that, but yeah.
So I'll make a motion, if you don't mind, I'll make a motion to approve all the other assessments, but to continue this let's see, 44, number 12, continue that, if that's okay.
Second.
There's a second. Brenda.
Sorry, Brenda.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. No, I would appreciate that, just because with some changeover we've had in staff, and then we can get information gathered and come back and visit with you further on it.
So, Mr. Chairman, would it be possible, and Bruce, maybe you can help, could we have a neighborhood meeting or something like that so we can, because it just seems like we do not have, we have not done a good job explaining what's going on. And so, and then on top of that, with Tony and John's idea of a special assessment to relook, but if that's okay, I would like to do that.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Pepcorn. That's what I was just talking to Steve about, is if we could delay this one. This would kind of be the poster child lead-in to the mayor's idea of the second brown bag that talks about reconstruction. That very question, if you're just going to put a pipe in the ground, you've got to dig through the pavement and put it back anyway. Is that truly a street improvement? I think that's a fair question.
So, Mr. Chairman, one more thing. So we should have it at Washington School, and have the engineers and have the staff there, and make sure everybody in the neighborhood knows when it is, and just, I think that would be
I think that'd be great. Dan, is there any problem with delaying this specials? We don't go to any additional cost to the city or anything? It's something that can be discussed, or?
There is one. You guys have a thing out that says that we will not get hit with interest if we pay this between the 10th and the 20th of this month. If you brown bag it to later than that, it's after that before we even know what our assessment is.
Right. So the gentleman is correct that all of the assessments that we're approving tonight do have a period of 10 days to be able to pay them off without any interest. Obviously, if we pull this from the list and don't approve it, that 10-day period doesn't start until at some point in the future it is approved. So, so the consequences of pulling this and not approving it at this time would be that it has been bonded, and so our interest payments, the city's debt has started. And so, but for one project, I'd have to meet with Kent, but we'd probably be okay, getting through. We'd probably end up assessing this then sometime next spring or something like that. It wouldn't, it would be too late to get it in the assessment, or get it into the, added on to the assessments for this fall. On October 1st, or excuse me, November 1st of every year, we have to let the county know how much to collect in specials. And so by delaying this, we won't have this one in that.
I think the brown bag is a separate item. I think this would just be an item. Engineers got to come up with a thing. I think Commissioner Pepcorn's suggestion, a neighborhood meeting, let's do that.
Yep.
We could do that well before our November 1st, right?
So we have to also have that 10-day payoff period in there. So really, I think the best thing to do at this time is to take our time, do it right, and probably have the actual
We eat some of the
assessment.
interest costs is what happens.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and Bruce had a suggestion that maybe one of the utilities advances the interest costs or something like that, gets paid back later. We can work on those details as staff.
You'll work on some details, but
Yep.
it's fair to have the neighborhood have a discussion. Let's figure this thing out. And that was my comment earlier, is that I think sometimes our rehab projects have unintended consequences of specials into the neighborhood that we need to discuss. So, Dan, we can do that as well? Yeah. Engineering can get together, and we'll send out a notice to the public, to all the people involved. Commissioner Grinberg?
Just before we move to the next item, Dan, you just comment, the methodology used, where you assess the specials here, recognizing we tabled this, is it consistent across other like projects of?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then the second thing I think is important, I think one gentleman who raised it tonight, this pipe, what's its capacity and what was the intent? Is it for expanded capacity from West Fargo, or is it solely for, I think we need to clear the air on that issue. What's the purpose?
Be more of an engineering question, but what we did expedite the reconstruction of the road. In 1 to 5 years, we were going to be in there reconstructing that road anyway, based on our criteria. The pipe just did expedite.
Brenda might have a.
Good evening again. In regards to the pipe capacity, that is the second interceptor sewer for the downtown area. So you have a Broadway interceptor sewer, and that will be the second interceptor sewer for downtown. And so those costs were all paid by the grant associated with the pipe.
So his question is it because of West Fargo, or is it because we need it for downtown?
For downtown.
And, we have this debate, we'll have this over the lunch, that downtown development doesn't, it's an advantage because it doesn't create specials. Recognizing there was a grant here, if we have growth in downtown, was that primarily the reason for the expanded capacity to go north? Because this is either aging infrastructure or it's a capacity issue to expand because of growth.
So the reason for the second interceptor sewer for downtown is due to wet weather infiltration into the pipe. So the more reconstruction we do, the tighter the pipes will be, and the less that we'll have of that wet weather infiltration. So what was happening is during wet weather events, it was filtering into our system, whether it's through roof drains connected into our sewer or whatever, and we are having to do overflows. So to offset overflows during wet weather events, to the river, that second interceptor sewer was installed. So as far as, as far as assisting with the growth and future development, it's always been my understanding, since we put the 45th Street interceptor sewer, that there was a need downtown to put that second interceptor sewer in, even at that, years ago.
Commissioner Gary.
To his point, is the pipe the same size as it was?
Is the pipe what?
Is the pipe the same size? Is it the same capacity as it was before, or is it bigger to handle more going through it? His question was, are we doing this because it's aging, it's not working right, or are we doing it because of capacity? Well, if it's because of capacity, we'd have to put a bigger pipe in. Is it the same size pipe?
So you have an existing interceptor sewer today from the downtown to the wastewater treatment plant. This is an additional interceptor sewer. So now we
Is it
have
larger
two
than the
interceptor
previous one?
sewers that will go from downtown to the wastewater treatment plant.
Mayors, Commissioners, this interceptor is essentially just to help prevent sanitary sewer overflows in the Broadway interceptor. The old Broadway interceptor took on a lot of water and rain events and flood events. This interceptor is specific for those wet weather flows. It's able to take wet weather flows and take it directly to the plant. It actually doubles our capacity because we had a lack of capacity before. If there was one area that was going to have an issue with sanitary sewer backup, it was the Broadway interceptor area. This Broadway interceptor specifically helps that area.
So it helps the neighbors not to have sewage back in their house?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. But I think it was important for the public to hear that.
Who runs our sewage?
Gotta meet 'em.
Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Gary?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Those of you that were here for that item, if you want to leave, you could leave. You wouldn't bother us. I know you were here for that. Thank you. Item C, Renaissance Zone Project for DFI BG LLC for the rehabilitation project located at 115, 117, and 119 Broadway North. Derek Lapointe to explain.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Yes, this is a rehabilitation Renaissance Zone application from DFI BG LLC. We're looking at rehabilitating the north two floors, or the top two floors of 115, 117, and 119 Broadway. Image up on your screen kind of shows the properties that we're talking about. The existing residential that was above this property were basically living corridors. There were a number of units that shared a single bathroom on the floor. A lot of the apartments there were actually not up to code and unlivable. The applicant is looking to rehab those existing structures, turn them into apartments, as well as adding 5 commercial units to the alley side of this structure. The construction would begin in the fall of 2017, looking to open in the fall of 2018. The investment for this particular property is $2.4 million, which is exceeding the state and local guidelines. Staff did score this high on our scale. We do feel that it meets the goals and objectives of our Renaissance Zone plan and are recommending approval. We do have representatives, Mike Zimney and Mike Almendinger, here to answer any questions specifically about the project. Thank you.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to the Renaissance Zone? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak? You guys want to say anything, or no? We'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Gary?
No.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 45, easement agreement with DFI Dillard and DFI Keisler that provides access between Dillard Building and Roberts Parking Garage and parking priority for residential tenants. Jim Gilmore to explain.
This is a request that came in from Kilbourne Group. They have plans to construct an apartment building, and actually I'll have main floor commercial and 4 floors of apartments above. It would be immediately north of the Roberts Commons parking garage. And their floors, the top 4 floors of their building match with the top 4 floors of the parking garage. They're designing it so that there could be a doorway, so you could park your car and just enter each individual floor of that apartment building. So part of the request is for that easement to have that access door. Kilbourne Group would be responsible for paying for the cost of that. We would have our consultant, Carl Walker, look at the plans and approve those. We're going to make sure there's windows in the doors so as people exit the apartments that they would be able to see any cars passing there. The second part of this request is for priority parking so that their tenants would be kind of top on any waiting list for parking. And so how that would work if I was waiting for a spot for parking and someone lived in this building, they would be next up on the list. Right now, this is just some information on the parking garage. Right now, we're setting aside 50 for hourly parking. We have 72 set aside for the Roberts building as that's completed, and we have 360 rented. As we look at the actual use, though, our research is showing that anywhere between 50 to 70% of the people that park there overnight are gone during the day, and so that's a real beneficial use for the parking garage, because you get double utilization. We charge someone $90 a month to live in or to park in the garage, and they're only there half the time. That means that parking spot can also be rented to a residential tenant. It's worked well in the Radisson. We have up to 150 guests overnight and over 200 that rent spots during the day. So that's an important way that these parking garages can provide maximum income, is to try to locate and partner with residential projects and hotel projects. So the request is for 100 parking spaces to the extent that they would be available on that waiting list. That the actual Dillard apartment building will have about 89 units approximately. The Kessler probably about roughly the same number. One of the advantages to the city for this is we get extra, there's going to increase demand for the parking in the garage, that dual usage, but it also means that the apartment developer doesn't have to provide their own parking. That leads to more development on the site, more income into the tax increment financing district, and ultimately more income into the property tax revenue. Again, we did some checking, did some research, and in St. Paul we saw anywhere between 45 to 78% vacant in residential buildings. Here in Fargo or Craig Properties, which is about 3 blocks away from here, approximately 80% vacant during the day, similar to Woodrow and downtown. These are a little further, so you might have a slightly higher. In our financial models, we're figuring it's about 50%. So the Parking Commission and staff are recommending approval. I have representatives here from Kilbourne Group and also Interstate Parking if you have any questions. So the easement agreement, Eric has reviewed this. If there are any other changes needed, we would have the mayor sign that final version. We want to make sure we have good language in there that we're approving the actual building plans. So do you have any questions on that recommendation?
Commissioner Grinberg first.
Maybe it's for Eric. Easement 101 here. I don't see a term in here.
So easements will be, they're not permanent, but they last 99 years by statute. So the idea would be that this easement would continue indefinitely for the benefit of the Dillard property, so they have access. There's language in there that if for some reason the structures were destroyed, the parties would confer about some kind of replacement access.
So couple follow-ups then, as our attorney, you're comfortable that we're consistent in other type easements? And it wouldn't be applicable probably to parking ramps, because I think the one that we had over on Main Avenue expired. Maybe that was a TIF.
That was a TIF.
But are you comfortable with this? And then second, was this talked about at the Parking Commission on the term, or the 99 years? Because you'll still be here. We won't.
Yeah, I thought it was perpetual. I didn't know we were limited to 99 years.
I thought you were pretty healthy.
But we were, I didn't expect there'd be any end to it. It'd be there as long as the two buildings are there.
Commissioner Pepcorn?
I got a couple of questions. That question did come up at the Parking Commission, and so that concerns me. It's basically a never-ending agreement, and so I think Kilbourne is great, and I have no problem with having the connection between the ramp, but this long-term thing. So here's a couple of my questions. So then, out of the total number of spaces, 172 will be committed to Kilbourne of the parking ramp. That's a large percentage. And we asked at our Parking Commission meeting, we asked the representatives if this was a concern for them that if we have that many long-term parkers. So I was hoping he would be here to explain that basically there's lots of turnover, and so it isn't like they're all going to be parked there all the time. So that's the one thing. The question I have for Jim is, are the rates, are they going to have to pay the market rates, or are they locked in, or
The rates are set by the city commission, and so, if you want to raise it to $200, so they would pay the same as charged to anyone else, so they get no discount on the rate. So whatever you set the rates for that particular year, that's what the rate is.
But I guess my main concern is this a large percentage? I mean, this parking ramp wasn't built just for that. I mean, it was built so we'd have parking for customers and employees from multiple places and not just one. And to me, we're almost, I'm not very good at math, but it's almost, half of them are going to be committed to one entity. So,
But those are residents. I mean, the difference is this is mixed-use property, so in some ways it's like the Radisson, which is partially doing that. It is a concern long-term. Are we going to have enough? But in theory, that's what the idea is, that the residents would rent.
If we have 455 parking spots. If we have 172 renters, and only half of them are used, and trying to do the math in my head too, but less than 90 of the 455 spaces would be used for residential use during the day. I think if we run into capacity problems, you're going to do that, and a couple different things you could do. One, you can start to raise the rates until you get back to more of a 99% capacity. Secondly, we could look at ways to build other facilities in the downtown. I think if we want more development downtown, we're going to need more parking.
Commissioner Garrick?
What are you done?
just real quick, the term concerns me. I guess that's what it boils down to. Obviously, they're great. What things are going on are great, but it's just to have that long of a term, and we don't. I mean, the ramp hasn't been operating for 6 months yet, and so that concerns me. Thank you,
Commissioner Garrick.
I think you answered me, but so the people living there will get the priority over a business, for example, that wants to buy 10 spots? Is that what you said?
If they're on the waiting list. Right now, what we have, there's about 81 more that are sitting vacant every day, and so right now there isn't a waiting list. We had actually about 100 people who were on the waiting list as we went down and filled the garage, and we decided we could put more in, and we went through another 100 and only rented 20 spots, and so that's where we are today. So a business would be on the waiting list too, but only up to 100 could be used by these apartments as a priority.
And then the easement, and you have to break it down for me, I guess, we're busting a hole in the wall, putting a door there, and that's what the easement is, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, as far as the term goes, I'm not so uncomfortable with that because the hole's there now. You know what I mean? These parking garages don't last 200 years. They last maybe 60, we hope. You know what I mean? So once the hole's there, I suppose. But it does concern me a little bit that we might be, this thing was put in place so that people would come downtown, people would use it, there would be turnover, and maybe we're giving too much to, the apartment building that's connected to it in order to use it that way. Because it's not just for Kilbourne, it's for everybody.
I do have Andy Renfrew from Interstate Parking. He can maybe address how it benefits us to have, partner with residential and hotels.
And then, Jim, when you're sitting down, maybe think about the fact, I think it was always kind of considered that this second structure that was going to go up was going to utilize the parking garage. I think in building and the concept we saw before, that was part of the to-do, You're just trying to make it convenient for somebody to park their car and walk over to their apartment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I think to Jim's point, I think his estimate is conservative, estimating about 50% of residential users being gone during the day. What we see in Fargo currently is closer to the 80% number. St. Paul, the examples were closer to that 50%. What that allows us to do is to oversell our garages. So we have 455 stalls. Our goal is to sell probably 20% or more of those stalls. That allows us to maximize revenue. If you look at our other facilities downtown, I would say at a minimum, we're probably 15% oversold at most of our facilities. We have some that are 150% oversold. And it's our job as your parking operator to recognize how far we can push that and maximize revenue to you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Questions,
Chairman, Andy,
Pepcorn?
can I ask you, I'm glad you're here, because so basically, it's going to be 172. So do you see this as an additional revenue thing, and you're not concerned about the commitment and all that? Would that summarize what you're, from our perspective?
Absolutely. Again, the ability to sell parking over multiple day parts, creating that turnover across day parts is how you maximize revenue. If there were concerns with capacity, certainly we operate a number of private parking facilities across the Midwest, and we have a lot of flexibility to control rates and to let the market decide how that's going to play out. There's other options, as Jim mentioned, with different programs, different rates. We could look at putting limitations on time restrictions for different access levels as well. So there's many options to control if we do run into a capacity issue.
So one more, and I apologize, but he's the expert. I mean, and they're doing a great job managing our parking, and so that's what I was looking to hear, that this is just a management tool, and this is revenue that can come in. So thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, and my eyes glaze over with some of these numbers, and I'm trying to sort out, well, where will we land? And here's what I want to know is, will we land where the citizens have more access or not to this parking lot? Right now, because I remember when the conversation, and I wasn't here when these agreements were vetted and put into place, but I remember not that many months ago, the number 50 surfaced for the public. And I know there were folks out there going, was that all we're going to get out of this whole new project? And I don't know if that's adequate or inadequate, but what I'd be concerned about is us going forward and finding out that the folks that got shortchanged were the people visiting downtown, and I just don't know how to assure that.
I mean, I think that goes into how we, as a city, manage a facility. One of the interesting things about the software we have is we can tell how many hourly parkers are in there each hour of the day, and right now I think we're peaking at about 40 at between, say, 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., which is also the peak time the residential people are gone. And so, we can control that by deciding how many monthlies you want to rent out, further capping your residential if there's more usage. But, the tools that our parking operator has is to knowing, of that residential, are we going to be able to oversell by 80% of them gone? They're going to know each day whether you're there or not, just with the license plate recognition and your card key. And so there's a lot of tools to manage that. And certainly having more parking downtown is one of the goals with this. And so, there is that demand Monday through Friday. We think it's about 50. If it's more, we may need to increase the numbers available. I was downtown on Saturday, and there were a lot of people in the ramp, and it was mostly empty. But boy, it's a great place to park. I think we'll see more usage now that we've got the streets open. That intersection closed. As we publicize it more, we'll maybe get more hourly. But certainly to support the businesses downtown, having adequate hourly parking is key throughout our system.
Yeah, I still got a couple questions.
Very good. Any other questions? Commissioner Strand.
Mayor, I would, if I could impose upon Parking Commissioner Mike Williams, you're chair of the commission, I believe. And could you just give us your sense of your overview of this, being as that's your commission?
Yeah, we designed, my name's Mike Williams, I'm a parking board commissioner.
and was part of putting this thing together. And the key was always to get more than 100% occupancy. So the mixed use is the key for this whole thing. Some things that we need to think about, though, are for public parking structures is the future of parking. So we need to be very strategic about it. And I am a little concerned about the 99-year term, just so we can manage it as best we can. So to me, when you provide some numbers, like for each unit, you get a priority spot, maybe we just check it in 3 years, see how it's working, and then go from there. I know it's nice for the people that are building to have it locked in for 99 years, but we're good partners with Kilbourne Group. We're good partners with the Downtown Community Partnership and those businesses there. But this is new for us. I know the Radisson has worked very well, but a hotel is one thing and residential units, I think, are another. The hotel at the Radisson has worked well. It's been one of our busiest ramps, and it's a good model. I just think that, like the hotel, we go into negotiation with the hotel owners about every 5 years. I think we should maybe try to think about putting some of that kind of language in this.
Mike, isn't part of this designed is if you lived on the 4th floor, you drive up to the 4th floor, park,
Yeah.
then walk across?
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of, and utilize 3rd, go to 3, 2, do those types of
Sure,
things?
it's very similar to the Radisson. I was the first bar manager at the Radisson. It was built in 85 and 86, and they had accesses on all those floors from the ramp to the hotel. So that's a good precedent. But again, we negotiate those contracts with the hotel like every 5 years, and I think that's not a bad idea to put into this contract.
Commissioner Garrick.
Mike, were you the no vote?
Was I?
Were you the no vote?
I didn't. I missed 4 parking meetings, and this is what I missed. I should have been there, I'm sorry.
I saw this 3-1 vote.
I would have said what I just said now.
Okay. And then my second one was, we have, I think, 2 separate pieces here. We have an easement agreement, and we have a parking agreement. I would feel comfortable if we would separate the question. And I'm all for the easement. I mean, putting a door there, I see no problem with that. Then secondly, what I would probably like to see is what Mike was just saying, have a shorter agreement as far as, the parking goes. I don't know why we have to connect those things, and I'm going to request that we separate those questions.
Commissioner Grinberg.
Well, I have concern over the term as well, so thanks for the clarity, Commissioner Garrick. But I have a question for Jim. Remind us of the financing for this project and the term.
We've set a tax increment financing district in place that would run possibly a little bit more than 20 years. We really won't see any income from that until after the Renaissance zone exemptions expire. So the bond payments each year now are being made by the revenue that we receive off the parking, as well as revenue that we make on other parking facilities that are paid for. I should really have Mike Allmendinger address the term. They've got a concern if this is a 1-year, agreement.
Let me finish.
Okay.
First, the next question is this time sensitive? We have to act on this tonight, is question. And then, my druthers would be that we mirror the agreement with the financing, whether that's 15 years, 20 years. I'm okay with that. 5 years seems a little too short to me. This is, whatever we've financed and we're at risk at, that we mirror that easement agreement is a thought that I would have. And to me, it's about control. I mean, who gets what parking spots and the distribution, that's all important stuff. For me, it's about control. And 20 years from now, there's going to be a whole different body at Kilbourne Group, most likely, as well as who's sitting here. And so is it important for the city to maintain control and have a look back? And I think the answer to that is yes.
I'll have Mike Allmendinger address the term. I mean, I think the only thing we have, comparable with, the Radisson, there's connections there that are, going to run as long as the building is there. I believe our initial parking agreement with the Radisson was in the 20 to 25 year time frame in terms of, how long, because we had a set amount that they were paying for spots, and that was in that 20 to 25 years. So I don't know what Kilbourne needs to get the financing and what they're comfortable with in order to move ahead. I'll let Mike Allmendinger address that.
Well, Mayor and Commissioners, Mike Allmendinger with the Kilbourne Group. And maybe I'll just start with a a little overview of how we got to this point on making this request. Right now, in our developers agreement with the city of Fargo for this parking garage, we've, the garage is built, owned and operated by the city, and the Kilborn Group is developing the project that you're seeing built around 3 sides of the garage right now, plus one more project that's called Kessler, that's on the south side of this, which is now the Pop Lot. So those are the 2 projects that we're committed to build, and we're going to move forward with those. This project that we're talking about today is the Dillard. So this is a $18 million project, and it has additional units for housing in related, in this area. When we started looking at this project, we recognized that we could build, it's a 6-story building. It will create, it has a 5-year Renaissance zone, but it will create $200,000 of property taxes every year that gets paid, to this project if it moves forward. And for us, when we talk to our banks to get financing, their question is, where are these residents going to park if we build this project? And so it's a financing question for us. Like we need to provide a parking solution, just like any project happens in Fargo, for this to happen. So I guess our thoughts are that, if we can have this priority for parking for these residents, and that allows, the project to move forward, we get financing, and we think it works really well for both parties because we know that most of the residents will be leaving during the day, kind of as the other cities have demonstrated, but we're still paying full rate for those parking spaces that are being utilized. So I guess there's many components of this that we think are really smart for this public-private partnership. If we don't move forward with this, we planned on breaking ground on this on October 23rd, and this is the last, agreement that we need to have together for us to break ground. If we don't do it, I think we're both trying to manage an unknown, which is how many parking spaces are we going to need for the residents living in this project. And if we don't need that, then I think we would just have to pause and understand what our numbers are.
What you're saying, really, there's 2 elements here. One is an easement to have easement in departments. That's really separate. So if we go ahead with the idea to give priority parking and allow parking, which is to our best benefit because we maximize revenue out of the parking ramp, and we've always talked about multiple uses of our parking ramps to Commissioner Williams just to push all the time. The reality is that if we relooked at that parking arrangement in 25 years, you should still be able to finance, would you not?
If we look at it in 25 years?
Yep.
Yeah, that's how long we're going to be, financing the project for.
So, if we match that and have the ability to look over, the commissioners basically don't like the 99 years, but they would like to relook at that. And if we had the ability to relook at that at that time, that also wouldn't harm your financial plan, right?
No, it wouldn't.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, if trying to sort out what I've just heard, what I think I've heard, if this parking agreement isn't approved, does that jeopardize the Dillard project?
If this isn't approved, I guess what we would propose is to basically, we would propose to replace the building requirement that is now in place at Kessler and replace that with the Dillard. I think that's better for, the city of Fargo and better for, downtown. And then we can just both wait for 2-3 years, see what kind of parking demand is at this garage, and then we can decide what type of project we would build at this Kessler site. Because we may just have to build a project with surface parking lot if we don't have access to parking.
If I might just ask another question then, so I can get this off my shoulders in my understanding. You're asking for priority placement for tenants from Dillard in this parking ramp if it's approved, that they can get a priority treatment in the waiting list for apartments or for parking. Just how would you answer the question about other tenants and other residents of downtown who already exist who don't have parking and their lack of being able to be prioritized on this public parking if we gave priority to this Dillard project? Mm-hmm. How do we answer that?
Well, I think that's an example of the partnership where it's, if we build this project, it's an $18 million project that creates, $200,000 a year of property taxes that the city of Fargo receives to pay down the bond on this parking structure. And the only way that project can move forward is if we have parking for it. If we don't have parking solution for it, then, and I think that other people parking in downtown Fargo will, they'll utilize, other public parking spaces or private lots or this garage. But they're not directly related to the, I guess to this decision.
Commissioner Strand wasn't around when we started this project out, but there was a thought to use that parking garage for utilization of the tenants. And that's the big idea, what do you want to park on the street? You really don't. You'd rather have them park in the garage. So.
Yeah, this is the reason that, there are projects that we've asked for before where we asked for a pilot in addition to a Renaissance zone. And this is the reason that we don't have to have that pilot is because we are able to be efficient with our project or with the parking.
Okay. Any other questions of the Commissioner? Commissioner Pepcorn?
One of the concepts is, even though they say it's priority parking, it isn't like those spots are going to be blocked off. And I think that's why we have to rely on our parking management. They're just going to be, and they might be required to park at the top ramp or something. So a lot of it is going to be management, and we have to rely on them to say, this can be a manageable thing. I would rather, 25 years is better than 99 years, but that still seems like a long time. I can get that they have to have this commitment for their financing, but 25 years, even, this ramp, we have not been open 6 months, or however, it hasn't been very long, Jim, and so that makes me nervous that we are really kind of we are in unknown territory, and so, and I get what you're saying, Mike, that you want to have it for 25 years, but that's a long time for us to commit to this if we need to make changes. So
yeah, no, and I understand that. We recognize that's an unknown, and what we would probably ask to do is come back and have the requirement for Kessler to be replaced at that Dillard, because we'd be building that one first. Yeah. And that's a different discussion we can have. And then we can just hold on and wait until both parties know more about parking requirements and in our downtown.
Yeah, but you're planning on starting in October.
Yeah, we'd like to be, so we'd be back.
You're going to be in the ground October 22nd.
Yeah, we'd be back at the next commission meeting asking for that amendment to the developer agreement.
Any other questions of the commission? Jim?
I can try to answer Commissioner Strand's question about what other residents living downtown. One of the other recommendations of interstate parking that we're going to be implementing, I believe it's in your rate structure, is that if you live downtown and you're going somewhere else during the day, there's a reduced parking rate. So as long as you're out by 10 in the morning and don't come back by 3, we would rent overnight parking to people, or certainly available on an hourly basis. But other residents that need to park downtown and maybe live in a less expensive apartment and don't have the $100 a month to pay for parking would be able to use this facility overnight at no cost.
But Jim, we're not 100% full, right? We're not even 50% full.
You can see here, we figure we got about 80 short of being full.
Okay. Okay, we're going to close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
You want to split it as he's talked about?
No.
99 years?
We are going to split, though, because I'm requesting it. I have that right to do that.
No, you can add an amendment. He can make a motion.
I'll move to approve, but with the 25-year review.
Okay.
That's the.
Is there a second?
I might be wrong here, John, but I have the right to split the question, don't I?
You do.
Yep. Yeah, you can do it.
You have the right to make a motion.
We'll
to
get
split
the
it, John.
second out of the
That would
way
have to be
here.
motivated.
It's been seconded.
There's a second. So you want to do an amendment, Commissioner Garrick?
Make a motion to separate the question.
And the question will be split into what, 2 questions?
Easement and agreement.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion on that?
Clarify what the banks need for financing. Is it the easement or is it the parking agreement?
Parking.
Mm-hmm.
Parking? I've seen heads nodding.
Mike, is that right? Parking agreement is what you need. You don't, the easement is a separate issue?
They're a blanket deal. So.
First and second, any further discussion? Commissioner Strand? No?
The Mayor, the only other comment I'll throw into this general conversation is this caveat of the changing world we're in. You know, there's people out in the countries, other places saying, be careful with parking lots in general, with ride shares and with the different dynamics going on. So I'm also trying to balance this, that we might find that that all changes for us, and there is less need maybe for cars and autos down the road. So I'm trying to, it's hard to measure where we'll go and land and actually be. And I just don't want to misstep. That's my concern.
So we'll vote on the suggested splitting the motion, right? Roll call vote?
Gary?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. So we'll start the first motion, the easement question, is that correct? Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Grinberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gary?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Now we'll have the motion on the parking arrangement with the 25-year relook.
I so move.
Second.
Or Eric?
Yep, just one clarification. I mean, I'm understanding what you're doing. There's a single document that contains both of these, and you're separating out the provisions. We'll still probably come back with two separate documents ultimately for your approval. I'm just making that point that there'll be some back and forth with the developer
Okay.
on it.
Any other discussion? We've talked this quite a bit, okay. Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Aye.
Grinberg? Gary?
Aye.
Strand?
Wait a minute, Greg didn't say yet. Greg?
Okay.
No.
Gary? No? Okay. Strand?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye.
Your break.
We'll take a 5-minute break and come back. Call the meeting back to order. I have one gentleman that had wanted to say something about specials, and he feels that he just wants to make a short 3-minute statement. And I'd ask forgiveness of the commissioners, but he got a little confused when we had them all approved. So he's talking regarding Traffic Signal Improvement District TN16E. Virgil, you want to make your statement here? He's got a little advice for us.
I appreciate you taking your time to listen to me. I drove 100 miles just to get here so that I'd be at the meeting, and then you let me out. But anyway, I'm speaking in regard to a traffic signal that's located on 40th Avenue out of Fox Run out there. There used to be a stop sign in there, and last spring or whatever, they put in a stop sign at the tune of $400,000. If it would have been put in probably when it was supposed to be put in, it would probably have been a hell of a lot cheaper. But anyway, we're assessed for that. Us small district, we're assessed for that stop sign. And my thinking is that everybody from north to south United States, east to the west, they all use that stop sign. And why should we be paying for it? And if, I don't mind paying part of it, and it's a small amount, I mean, but it adds up. And not only that, you don't have a gas tax, huh? Fargo
His
does not
suggestion
have
was
a
that we
gas
get a
tax.
gas tax, so I'll leave that to Commissioner Grinberg to discuss.
So anything to do with transportation, like stop signs and all that kind of stuff, should come from a transportation fund. And if you would assess a small amount, a penny or half cent a gallon of gas in Fargo, you would have money to do those things instead of socking it to us residentials. You know, people are getting driven right out of their houses. I mean, this is serious business.
Yep.
And
Thank you,
so-
and I think Commissioner Pepcorn's going to talk about taxing in his, a little bit later today, okay?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Virgil.
So, yeah, so well, I met last week time on it, while you said that this is where I was supposed to come. So, but
And Steve,
it's an
Craig,
unfair tax.
if you could come up and just explain what he could do now if he doesn't agree with the tax. Thank you, Virgil.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go to item 46, I believe, is our last public Steve, you want to just explain what he could do if he wants to not pay it?
The next step would be to go into litigation, I guess.
City
So
Park.
we've gone through the process of the city, or the Special Assessment Commission determining the benefit. They've assigned the benefit. The only thing that really is left is either for you to, the City Commission, to approve the project, which you guys did earlier, or to find another funding source to pay down some of the specials. So that's kind of where we're at.
Eric, you want to say something?
Sorry, Mayor, I know you're trying to move things along, but just if I think it'd be helpful, just for the record, in the event that in approving the items 1 through B, 1 through C, except for number 12, 1 through 21, except 1 through 23, except for 12, just to at least inquire if there was anybody on any other project that wanted to speak. I don't think there was, but I think there was an assumption that they were all here for 12. There is anyone
Thank you.
else?
Is there anybody else that wanted to speak to the assessments? Okay.
At least the record can reflect that. Thanks.
May the record reflect that, Shelley. Item 46, consider contract award for consulting services for Apex Engineering Group to the amount of $1,023,065.
All right, good evening, Mayor.
Jeremy to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Hopefully this should be pretty straightforward. So us engineers downstairs, we're moving forward with a street reconstruction project on 13th Avenue, west of 45th Street. And the road's in pretty poor shape. It's a pretty old street. Half of this project will be in Fargo. The other half will be in West Fargo. I put this 2-second slide together here for you. So 52nd Street / 17th Street's right in the middle. West Fargo is currently tearing up 9th Street and a block or two on 13th Avenue. So this would tie into their work on the west end, and then on the east end, it would tie into our work that we did back in 2005. So to get this thing really bid when it needs to be bid in early March, we can't do it in-house. We needed to farm it out. So we got approval through Public Works and you folks to go with a proposal, and we had 4 firms submit, and the selected company is Apex Engineering. We qualified those as the most qualified, and they were the cheapest at $1 million.
So is this a public discussion, or is this just Commissioner Pepcorn's, anything over $1 million we discuss?
I don't think there's much to discuss other than the contract itself.
Okay.
The one thing of note is this will be 50-50 with us and West Fargo.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gary?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. Now we're going to go back to item 43. Commissioner Pepcorn would like to discuss property tax reform. Commissioner
Sure,
Pepcorn.
and I'm going to be real brief, and it's an open discussion, but I just wanted to say that we are getting, property tax is a serious issue, not just for the city of Fargo, but statewide, and I'm going to beat up on the legislature a little bit. We've been promised 10 years for property tax reform, and it hasn't happened. And so if you can't do it when we've had billions of dollars in revenue to deal with, I think the time has come. We need citizen-led property tax reform. And so I would encourage, I'm not going to be the leader. I think we would all participate happily, but I think something has to be done. And so what I would like to do is encourage the citizens to develop a referral and have us all, we have a lot of experts in the city. I think we all have solutions to make it better, but our property tax system is dysfunctional. So basically what I'm saying is, it's time, and we city leaders. I mean, we're hearing it on specials. We're hearing it on property taxes, and so I think something has to be done. And I like the citizen-led part of it because there's a lot of smart people in our state, and it's not just the city of Fargo, statewide. And so, however I can do, I think we would all participate. But let's go. I think it's time. So those are my comments. Thank you for the opportunity.
Any discussion by the commission? So I assume that's just a statement that you make?
Yep. Just,
Okay.
and it's just one small city commissioner's opinion, so I didn't mean to throw anybody else in, and I didn't mean to beat up the legislature too much, but if anybody, we have been around, and they did say that, they were, and I do think in the legislative system, it's very difficult. I think they get a lot of pressures from all these different groups. To give you an example, the nonprofits, do you know how concerned they are about property taxes? Zero. They don't care. And if you started looking around the city of Fargo, we got a lot of nonprofit land in the city of Fargo. And so those, but I mean, I didn't mean to pick out that, but you could talk about farms, you can talk about lots of things. It's a very sensitive thing, but there's got to be a better system than what we have right now. Once again, my opinion, I didn't mean to include anybody else. Thank you very much.
Well, since he hit me, you know, I think Commissioner Pepcorn raises, you know, a valid point for point of emphasis, but, you know, the devil's in the details. Yep. I served 22 years. Property tax was always part of the debate, the methodology behind it, the assessment process, but quite frankly, the local dollars that are assessed through property tax take care of people. That's the debate that's happened now since the oil is slacked off in western North Dakota, is that there's an adjustment going on in taking care of people in social services. So the money has to come from somewhere. And then the schools, you know, as Commissioner Strand would know with his tenure on the school board, you know, education and taking care of people, that's where the bulk of property tax goes. The legislature has done a tremendous job buying down those property tax rates when the times were really booming in North Dakota, and to the tune of almost $3 billion of tax relief. So they've made a noble gesture, but given the tightness of the budget, they have to adjust, and that's where they shift into the social services. I did my own kind of analysis of, you know, 10, 12 homes across the city, north side, south side, and what people are paying in their city tax that we're responsible for. In my opinion, people get a bargain for what they pay for their city taxes and the services. And so it's a comprehensive problem. It's more directed at, you know, where the bigger budgets are and taking care of people. But the reform issue, as you've alluded to, Commissioner Pepcorn, is a challenge between rural and urban, and who can pay and who can't, agriculture versus urban. It's a complex issue that the legislature has made baby steps over the years trying to figure out different methodology for it. But at the end of the day, it's about dollars spent.
Can I just add one more thing? I don't, like, in the past, there has been attempts to abolish the property tax. I think people would support a reasonable reform of property tax, and that's what needs to be done. And so, and I think it actually ties in with what we're going to talk about with specials too. But it's time, and I think the legislature, it's very difficult. I think they have a lot of, it's a lot more difficult. I think if we have a citizen-led effort with lots of solutions instead of just complaining, I think it could be very successful. And I think if it was everybody got to participate, I think it could be a very positive thing.
Commissioner Strand.
Certainly, thanks, Mayor. Commissioner Pepcorn, I think the people would appreciate what you're saying a lot, and the whole notion of not being able to afford to stay in your home sometimes is a reality for some folks on fixed incomes. A concern I have going forward is, I remember when citizens led an effort, I remember when some public officials essentially called them kooks. And they're not kooks, they're just passionate about a need for reform. And then, of course, you throw valuations in there, and that complicates and exacerbates the need for reform when you all of a sudden have just a dramatic increase in your valuations in 1 year. It seems arbitrarily. But another concern I have going forward is we have this three-legged stool. We have the income tax, we have property taxes, we have sales taxes. And I think we all need to be really concerned as well about sales taxes. With the changing retail market going on right now, we might have a whole different situation with revenues coming our way with potential losses. So they all need reform, and they all need study, and I would encourage as well to have citizens at the table as much as possible with their elected leaders.
Very good.
Thank you.
We'll now go to item 48. Commissioner Grinberg is going to discuss election reform proposals.
Yes, I'm going to, in a moment, pass out some information, and I'm going to have Mr. Johnson provide a review of a memo that has been in draft form I'll say through the summer. But I think it's important to review the background and the election process. On August 1st, Commissioner Gehrig and I recommended to the commission a task force on election reform that, if you recall, former Mayor Bruce Furnace and our former Commissioner Arlette Preston served as former elected officials, sitting as elected officials for the city of Fargo, and then each of us appointed one person for a 7-member committee. And that work started in September. And the task force that Commissioner Gehrig and I suggested for approval was to look at whether a runoff election to occur and conditions that would trigger a runoff election, the number of city commissioners was also part of the task force, whether the city of Fargo should convert from a commission form to a council or a modern council, whether the duties of the mayor should be recognized as full-time. I'll have a Kleenex, please. And term limits. And so the task force, thank you, began about its work. And on February 14th, they were read to a presentation of their results. And I think it's important to highlight what they recommended for those that are interested in the public, that they were assigned initial several goals to guide discussions and decisions around increased voter turnout, simple voting procedures, efficient and effective governance model, fair and equitable representation. The first area was the election timing and the voting system, and several possible solutions were examined to address the plurality issue, primary and general elections, approval voting, instant runoff voting, and proportional voting was weighted by the task force. The second was the number of people to serve in the form of government. Discussion about adding commissioners from 4 to 6 and a mayor took place. And the form of governance, item 3, was city commission versus city council and modern city council. The group could not reach agreement on the type of governance model and their work and their deliberations. And the fourth was the status of the mayor. They want you part-time, if you recall. And term limits, the group felt that the current system works just fine and should be retained. And so, step back to the spring when we had public hearings twice. I asked, I think Commissioner Strand as well, and reinforced Commissioner Gehrig, let's have public comment and sentiment about people's opinions on election reform. And if you recall, it was pretty light. Not many showed up. And then there was some desire by some to advance this. And from my perspective as a city commissioner, honestly, I thought because it was summer, people weren't paying attention. And quite honestly, some were driving this that were interested in a recall. And in my opinion, it wasn't fair to advance any further discussion at this commission level until that recall process was resolved, because they're two different issues. And it wouldn't have been fair to the public to have one effort underway and then election reform at the same time. So hence, we sat through the summer. And then things spirited up again with interest from the community, which is good. And a footnote, I would say that one of the hardest jobs that I had serving in the legislature for so many years, and I'd liken it to serving on a city commission, the number one challenge we have is, what is the silent majority? What's the sentiment of the silent majority? Call it the old 80-20 rule. Those that have a passionate interest, and what's the general public think on what the right decisions are. And so the other thing that's important to recognize for those that have been passionate about this and written letters to the editor is the fact of the matter is any action by this commission would be on a ballot in June of 18. It wouldn't affect anybody running for re-election. The present laws, the present procedure of election would sustain itself. And if the voters decided on a change in June of 2018, it would go into effect in June of 2020. So there's no basis for anybody thinking that they're going to have their way with changing the election laws to change the next outcome on the election. And there are people passionate about that. We recognize that. And so putting all that into perspective, my sense all along has been, and belief, is that if you're to serve in a public office, you should have 50% plus one. And so tonight I have handouts that my proposal, there's 3 copies, is to provide this for more discussion here at the City Commission. My intention is not to make any motions tonight, but to take action in 2 weeks on whatever these two particular items and what other opinions and thoughts other commissioners have for their thoughts with election reform. And in your packet is just a recap of the task force, some information on approval voting, some information from like Midwest cities and how they go about their election process. And I'm going to have Eric Johnson comment on the memo that I had him finalize here last week on what I'm going to recommend is a primary to general election process that requires a home rule charter change. It's in the packet that Eric will talk about that you have before you, and also allow the citizens to vote whether they want to move to pattern what the county does. If you want to be a city commissioner, you follow the county rule. You have 11 candidates running in June, you wean that down, and you run in November. And if you want the job, in my personal opinion, you have to run twice, just like county commissioners. The second is to let the voters decide if they want to add 2 commissioners to the city commission. So 6 and 1. And again, if the voters, and you approve this, and they voted it in June of 18, that wouldn't go into effect till June of 2020. So I'm going to ask Eric just to kind of walk through the mechanics of this and answer any questions that you might have. And I do have a copy of this packet for you, Shelley.
Eric. Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Grinberg. This memo, which I understand is in your packet, explains all this. I'll hit the highlights. Both contemplate a home rule charter amendment. Those are the kinds of things that require a citywide vote. The first one addressed is the expansion from 5 commissioners, the mayor and 4 commissioners, to 7 in total. And the process is fairly straightforward. The city commission would adopt a resolution that actually contains the actual wording change to the home rule charter. A ballot is put together and put on the election, as Commissioner Grinberg just said, for June of 2018. The idea, as already said, would be that it would take effect at the election in 2020. The other thing that is addressed in this resolution would be just there. Normally you just want to spread out the number of commissioners that are elected. Currently, 2 commissioners are elected every 2 years, with a mayor being elected every 4 years. And with the addition of 2 more, you just split those up so that, so in other words, there would be an election in 2020, were this all to come to pass. There'd be an election in 2020 for actually 4 commissioners. Of the 4, 1 would have a 2-year term. And so then they would get on to the proper alternating cycle. So included in the packet is the actual resolution that the city commission might approve, at least a draft, for that purpose. Then the second is the same type of process for a home rule charter that creates sort of a primary followed by a general election. As the commissioner already said, there might be more than one way to do this, but probably the simplest way is to simply adopt the same primary and general election as we have statewide for all kinds of offices, but most particularly the county commission office. And again, it's just a matter of having a home rule charter amendment to call for that. The way I've structured it and proposed structuring it is that the actual mechanism of, if approved by the voters, would come back to the city commission to approve, the actual precise mechanics of the election process. That's a significant amount of detail. It seems to be simpler to just ask the voters to vote. You want to have a primary followed by a general election, and if they approve it, the city commission would adopt the necessary details by ordinance. The value of that is, if we're going to pattern ourselves after the state law for county elections, there might be a change in the legislature, a legislative change to how that works that would allow the city commission to simply have a city commission adoption of an ordinance that would, to conform to the state legislature sometime in the future. So if that made any sense, again, a resolution is included here that would be, in theory, approved by the city commission, would put on the ballot for the 2018.
Commissioner Grinberg.
And just in closing, the other item in your packet is a copy of a Senate Bill 2344 from 1987. It was tried 30 years ago for approval voting, and it never got to light of day in the full legislature. And, you know, I believe, and we all have the responsibility, in my judgment, approval voting is too risky. No one else is doing it. We look around, there's similar types of elections in the Midwest. And I think whatever we do needs to be simple and with clarity. And so my intention was to bring this up and then have 2 weeks for thoughts and hopefully media attention to this, so the public weighs in, and then make a decision. Because I think it's important that we move on this for next year so that people know that this is coming if we decide to act with, you know, a majority vote. And up until now, it really hasn't been a pressing issue because of the June 18. And so those are my comments. And
Any other discussion? Mr. Gehrig.
I'll just make the simple point that a runoff election has never resulted in Fargo in a 51% majority. We had it for 15 years, and it never resulted that way. So if you have two commissioners or four people running for two spots, the likelihood of anyone getting 51% of that is nearly impossible. So I understand the sentiment. We want a mandate. We want to be hired because the majority of people want us to be there. And like you said, Commissioner Grinberg, I've received probably 6 phone calls about this issue in the last 6 months or so. One of those calls was from Berkeley, California. People there's a small special interest group out there that's trying to change the way we're doing things. And I told that person I didn't appreciate him trying to meddle in our elections. I've got people from Twitter and Facebook, all from Berkeley, trying to tell me how we should run our elections here in Fargo. So if we make a change, it should be for the best. It shouldn't be just to make a change. We've tried other things, and it didn't result in anything different. So I hope there's a thoughtful conversation coming forward, and I'd be happy to have that with anyone who wants to call from Fargo.
Could you just explain that one item you went over, that if 2 commissioners run, you could never get 51%?
Right. So for example, Tony Grinberg and John Strand ran 15% vote, give or take. There were 11 candidates, something like that. The reality is 32% of people voted for you, and 30% voted for you, because everyone got 2 votes. So we just assume that everyone had 2 votes and they took 2 votes. That means that I would vote for John and then I'd vote for somebody else. That means 30% of people clicked John's name. It's pretty simple, but it's not something that your mind instantly goes to. So, you know, while that's not a majority, it's still certainly better than 15%. It's absolutely impossible to get 51% if everyone takes 2 votes. If I got everyone to click my name once and then vote for somebody else, I would get a 50% majority. It would not be 51, it would not be 57, it wouldn't be 100%, it would be 50%, because everyone gets 2 votes, assuming everyone takes those 2 votes. So, you know, these op-eds and things coming out saying that we want a 55% or whatever majority, it simply cannot happen the way that we do elections. A runoff won't fix that, and many other things won't fix that. So I just want to have an open, honest conversation about what the math says about what people are demanding.
So that's it. So we're supposed to take this 2 weeks, come back next week and make a decision. And basically, you could modify your proposals, right? Okay. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. And Commissioner Grinberg, I think we'll all appreciate this getting moved forward one way or the other. I'm assuming that when we weigh recommendations that we will also have in front of us, and I'm not saying where I'll land, I'm assuming we will weigh the recommendations from the Citizens Task Force that came through with recommendations about going to a 7-member commission and also about going to consider approval voting. And here's where I'm at. I believe we owe the citizens answers. You know, we've asked people for their feedback, we've asked for their input, we also have legislative input and guidance, and I believe that we owe them an answer to take this off the shelf and one way or the other deliver to them a response to their best thinking. I have questions about all of the above. You know, I'm still trying to sort out approval voting versus ranked voting versus plurality voting versus runoffs, you know, versus whatever. And I have pros and cons with all of them, but I'm going to look for what the citizens' input is too about that. And I'm sure we all have thoughts about how big our commission should be or whether it stays the same, but that's where I'm at, is I just want to hear from the people. If I have a recommendation, I would suggest that we not be too tightly aligned to a time frame that might in any way, shape, or form diminish public engagement. I'm more interested in public engagement and public feedback and public direction than I am about how I feel about this, because this is a people issue. But thank you for moving this forward. I think that will be productive for all of us.
Next item, item 49. Commissioner Garing would like to discuss the injunction on the FM diversion. Commissioner Garing.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to have this out in public. It's been a little bit over a month now since the injunction came out for the FM diversion, and I just wanted to give the people an opportunity to hear from the leaders of your city to hear what they think about it. And by no means am I trying to debate anybody. I'll say my two cents and then I'll stop. And if someone else wants to speak out about their position, they're more than welcome to do that. We are all in one capacity or another on the Diversion Authority. Finance Committee is what I am on. Everyone else is on something different. The injunction, the way that I read it, said full stop on flood protection for the city of Fargo unless you get a letter from the judge saying you can complete a specific project. To this point, we have been continuing certain projects in Oxbow, in the city, things like that. Now, I have no doubt that we need to continue some of these projects. It's not my goal to stop those projects. I simply want to do it the right way so that we aren't held in contempt and that these projects don't get stopped for a longer term. I simply want us to do what the judge asked and officially ask him to ask the DNR, Minnesota DNR, what projects we can or can't do, get that in writing, have it come back to us so that we then have clear guidance as to what we can or cannot do. To this point, we have not done that. At least we have not received a letter from the DNR saying we can do any project or we can't do any project or anything of the sort. What we have done is asked our lawyers to say what projects they think we can continue with. It's my perspective that we've been wrong in the past, and that's why we're in the position that we're in, and that's why we have an injunction against us. So as a Finance Committee member, I'm voting no on any project that is asking for funds that doesn't have a letter attached to it saying the judge that wrote the injunction is saying you can do this, is saying that Minnesota DNR approves of this project. Look, Minnesota doesn't want us to stop building walls in Fargo. Okay, they want us to continue doing those things. The JPA, the folks down or upstream from us, they don't care if we're building walls in Fargo. They don't want us to build the diversion in its current state, and that's why we are here the way we are here. So there are an abundant amount of projects we can continue with. We simply need to get that letter saying we can, and then we can move forward. So that's where I'm coming from. If you see the minutes from the meetings and you see that I'm voting no on certain projects, it's not that I'm anti-diversion, which I've already been accused of numerous times. It is that we need to change the way we're proceeding and do it the way the injunction says to do it, and then look at alternatives to the diversion, not a complete redo, but where can we meet with the DNR to get this project going forward. So that's my piece. That's where I'm coming from. That's why I'm voting the way I do. I encourage the commissioners to put their 2 cents in, but by no means am I trying to debate or challenge or say anyone else is wrong. That's the way I read the injunction. That's the way that I'm going to carry forward.
Eric Johnson, could you just comment on the question of whether we should proceed or not in Oxbow? You talk to the attorney.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So I think that with respect to Oxbow, I think there's agreement. We'll start with the idea that we had the preliminary injunction issued a month ago, September 7th, I think was the date. There was another stipulation that resulted in another order entered this past spring that pertains specifically to Oxbow. Admittedly, there's a level of interpretation perhaps involved, but at least our attorneys at Dorsey that have been the litigators on this matter have conferred with both the DNR and the JPA, the upstream interests, in terms of how that's interpreted. I think there's a uniform agreement with respect to everything, perhaps with the exception of some elements at Oxbow. Again, our litigation counsel have an opinion about how that should fall into place, but certainly the agreement entered into this past spring about Oxbow, again, stipulated in writing by all the parties and approved by the court, certainly authorized construction through 2017. There's an open issue as to construction beyond that. If you like, Mr. Mayor, I can hand out an opinion from Dorsey regarding their analysis on Oxbow, and happy to share that.
I think for the commissioners, you can do that just so they have that. Any other discussion or comments? Item 6, sole source procurement for family health care for annual medical interpreting services at estimated amount of $36,000. Explanation by Dave Pipcorn, and Ruth is available.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so I just asked it to be moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda, and my main thing that I would like Ruth to do is do a flow chart of how this goes, because it was very confusing. I don't quite get, so if you would just go, okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. What you have before you is a sole source procurement request for our medical interpreting services. We looked at 3 organizations within our area that provide medical interpreting. So backing up a step, because we receive federal funding, both through Medicaid and many of our grants, our federal grants, we're required to provide interpreters for medical services that we provide. So we looked at 3 entities, Family Healthcare Center, who we have a longstanding relationship with and has been doing that for us. LSS also provides community medical interpreters, and we also looked at Cultural Diversity Resources of Fargo. They do not provide medical interpreters, but we did look at those 3 entities. So the money, in the difference from 2 weeks ago when I was here, that was money that we were getting from LSS to help cover nursing case management services. This is money that we are asking we pay to Family Healthcare Center to provide the medical interpreter services for us as we see our clients.
Okay, so can I ask you? So this is money that we're paying, but do we get reimbursed by the federal government to pay? That's I'm just, it's really confusing.
I know it. Yeah, there's lots of monies coming and going. We are not able to bill insurances for interpreter costs, so that is one way we do not get money. We are hoping to expand the contract that I was here with 2 weeks ago for, I believe that was $12,000 for nurse case management services. In previous years, we've also been able to use that for interpreter services. We're waiting on an amendment to that grant, hopefully to expand our interpreter to be able to
But Ruth,
cover some of these
the
costs.
2 big systems in town, do they get, I mean, if they have interpreters for, if I see a patient, do they get paid by the government at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, so what I'm aware, the 2 big system has interpreters, and you basically pay for that, or I can call a 1-800 number. So it is an issue, yes.
Yeah.
But Mr. Chairman, so to give an example, so, and I know all these are not refugees, correct? Like
Not all of them. Some of them.
no,
but
what
yes.
I'm getting to is, we should be getting reimbursed for this. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is Fargo money that's going to be paying for this, and we should be getting reimbursed for this. That's my main point. It's very confusing, and I'm not that bright of a guy. And so I'm just trying to figure out, but this is not fair to us, because here's what's happening. 80% of the refugees in North Dakota are coming to Fargo area, but our taxpayers are bearing the brunt of it. And so anyway, and I hope you know this, Ruth. I am not criticizing you or second guessing you. I hope you look at this as an opportunity, because we got a lot to learn, and so I hope you take it that way.
Absolutely. And I think it is really important to note that, yes, some of this is for our new Americans and our refugees, but we also see a lot of individuals who are non-English speaking who are not refugees. NDSU students, a variety of folks. And so, I also think it's really important to note that, like I had mentioned 2 weeks ago, that almost $3.4 million of our budget are federal dollars. And so in order for us to receive those federal dollars, this is a requirement that we must do.
And we also have to give good medical care, and you can't do it unless you have interpreters.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had a variety of patients come in with opposite problems than we thought.
Yeah. When we first started using interpreters, I think the medical community across the area, we relied on family members, and we found out very soon that is not good practice at all. And so we want to use medical interpreters who are trained and recertified on an annual basis.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion?
Can I just add one thing? But this isn't just health, though. This is every department. This is an issue, and so I'm just saying, I think if we organize this and keep track of this, we should be asking for reimbursement, because our taxpayers are paying for a portion of this, and it's not right. And so, thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm just going to exercise a little bit of caution that I do appreciate this notion of us drilling down deeply into our budgets. But I want us to be cautious that we all of a sudden don't appear to maybe be singling any particular groups of people out. And I don't know you're doing that. In fact, you're the one presenting this motion, Commissioner Pepcorn, but just as a caution to all of us is that we always stay on the balcony view where all citizens deserve equitable treatment under the law and under the services we provide. And just so this doesn't start going into a point where we remove our color blindness and start seeing color and then criticize more. And this is a conversation across the country of how to stay in the place where you're honoring everybody and giving everybody equal equitable treatment under the services you provide. And that's all. I get a little wary if this were to look like we're just going at the refugee demands from us.
Mr. Pipcorn.
My main thing, John, is this is about tax money. If somebody was using their own money, it's none of our business. But this is our taxpayers' money, and I get your message. But just to make clear, there's a lot of people have been labeling me for asking questions, and I got thick skin, so it doesn't bother me one bit. But I'm asking about how our tax money is being spent, and so I can appreciate your message. But the one thing I will say is, so I've been a commissioner for a long time. We used to never see these. They weren't on the consent agenda or anywhere, and so now we're at least seeing them. And so I don't apologize for asking where our money's being spent. And, you know, when they call, the ironic thing is they're the one calling me racial insults. Isn't that ironic? But I can handle it because I got thick skin. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. You know, I noticed a lot of people in the audience, the inclusive resolution, we passed already. So I think if there were some people that wanted to talk, that resolution has passed early in the session, only because Indigenous Day is being celebrated right now, and the commission tried to honor that. So I apologize if some people thought they were going to be able to speak tonight. We're done with that particular part. Do we have any other business?
12I.
It moved into part of the consent agenda.
Awesome. You're way ahead of me.
No. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Adjourn.